A lot of times, that's why people think they want out, is because they're so burnt out from doing all the things. And so a lot of times, it's not that people don't want their business anymore. They just don't want everything that comes along with it. That's another point for really driving in. Can this run without me? So when you do need a break, because no matter how much you love your work, everybody needs a break sometimes. You can take that break and renew so that you can come back ready to, get into it.
Welcome to Those Odd Numbers podcast. My name is Jason Snider. I'm the founder and CEO of Main Street Financial Group. We are your fractional finance team.
I'm Summer McFarlen. I'm a CPA and certified tax coach. I'm also the co-owner of Main Street Tax Group, where we do strategic tax planning so you can keep more of what you earn.
I am Masheka Turner, and I am the owner of Bright Skies Business Services. We are your outsourced accounting firm and profit first strategies. And we are here to help you create wealth through your business by gaining clarity around your numbers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Those Odd Numbers. I'm here with Masheka and Jason, and today's topic is selling your business. So I'll just start out by saying I'm going to give you some pretty blunt truths here. A, your business is probably not worth what you think it is. And B, buyers only care about two things: cash flow and risk. So we're going to delve into this topic today and give you some tips on how to build value in your business and to get ready to sell your business.
And it's not, you just don't show up and next day, I want to sell my business and the money's going to come in.
If you're thinking about selling your business, and we were talking about this earlier, and Masheka made a very good point. Even if you're not planning on selling your business, you should always treat your business like you're getting ready to sell your business, right? Because that's what builds the value. If you're going to pass it along to your kids or sell, or maybe you have a key employee that maybe wants to buy your business one day, you always got to treat it like you're getting it ready to sell. And Jason actually has a background in business brokering. So we're going to pick his brain today about that as well.
I think the overall theme you're going to hear is it's not something you just wake up and then the next day you're out in the process to sell. The best exits in that, what I mean by that is a good deal for the buyer. The seller gets largely what they're looking for, happen years in advance in most cases of planning, preparation, and things. And hopefully we're going to be able to share some of those experiences through some of our own clients and what they experienced and how it worked out for them by following many of the tips that I think we're going to be sharing in the next 20, 30 minutes. I'm sure this will be a longer conversation.
It could be a long conversation. I guess let's talk about what actually drives value. Masheka, you were talking about this to us earlier about one of the key things, or 2-3 key things that drive the value.
So usually what I say, of course, Summer mentioned it earlier, just run it like you're going to sell it from the get-go. Not only do you typically have a more profitable business, you have a business that's ran better because you're already thinking about the business running without you. But some of the steps that I always say is, of course, we have to have a profitable business.
That's it.
And so some of the steps that I say, and I want you to really think about where your business is in these steps. Also, if some of these steps you're not there yet, I want you to really start thinking about what has to happen. So these are the things that I have found and how I approach my own business. First thing is, I know I'm always talking about bookkeeping, but you need clarity around the numbers.
Starts with the numbers.
Exactly. A lot of times, if you're thinking about selling this business, no one is even going to take it seriously if you do not have a set of books to present that tells the history and currently what's happening in this business. That's not even a serious conversation, first of all. So clarity around the numbers, profit first to manage the cash, because no matter how much money you're making, you always need to manage the cash flow, because that's one of the things that they're buying most of.
Yeah, that's the first thing they're looking at.
That's it. A well-ran business that is cash flowing. That's just what it is. And then another step further is a tax strategy. So step 3 would be a tax strategy. And then for you personally, a wealth vehicle, because let's think about this. If you're selling this business, that is something you have to think about what to do with the proceeds. And while we're in business is how we're going to protect it. So also, if you get those proceeds, how do we protect and grow with those? And then, of course, getting that business ready to sell with the valuation process. So I want you to really think about whether you just got started last year or whether you've been in business 20 years. Do you really have things in place to have a serious conversation about selling your business? And Summer can get more into it, and Jason, because they've done this more. But I will say this, so far I've had a few clients sell their business. And one of the things that really brought the deal through was that they had solid financials. You don't have that, this is just not a serious conversation.
Yep. Yeah. No, attest to that. As Summer and Masheka both mentioned, I did business brokering for a period of time, and I would define that as businesses generally below 5 million in revenues. It is a different game or process for those of 2 to 5 million and above, depending on what the industry is. Becomes a different approach. We're going to focus primarily on what we call financial buyers, but there is a place for what we call strategic buyers who they look at different aspects, numbers, approaching. It's almost like a replacement value conversation when it is about a financial investment conversation. But I think most of our discussion is going to be in the financial buyer arena because that's where most of our clients are operating in as far as revenue size and things. So you're correct. The financials are the only place to start. There's no conversation until there's something presentable that we can run some analysis on with valuation, because everything is based on cash flow at this level. You'll hear different numbers of SDE this, EBITDA that. There's going to be different metrics that are out there, but with none of those happen without clean books. And generally, you need 3 full years of financials, unless you're a startup and have less than 2 years of operations or something like that. 1, you need to present that to your own analysis to see what the valuation is. 2, your buyer is likely going to need financing, and they're going to need those financials for the SBA. Generally, that's usually the largest player in acquisition financing, and there's certain criteria that they need to have in place. They're one of the few that will underwrite on the business financials, the loan. Many of the other banks, the private commercial acquisition financing is on the creditworthiness of the buyer themselves or their entity if it's not SBA. But all of those conversations start with clean financials. And I can say from experience, hand grenades or surprises in the financials when due diligence comes around will torpedo the deal and things. And so disclose that to your advisors, whoever you're working with, if there are going to be things, and do an extra review, hire somebody like ourselves to review and go through the books. We're not auditing it. We're not reviewing it in the compilation sense, but looking for the potential things that a due diligence advisor to a buyer would likely find and uncover. You want to get that out visible and in front, because it's not so much specifically the item itself, it's that you didn't share it with the prospective buyer. Torpedoes it in the sense of there's mistrust now. Whether it was intentional or not, they look at you either whether you tried to intentionally hide, which obviously we wouldn't advise anything like that, but just the fact that it slipped through to that point puts an onus back on you that you aren't prepared, and there's likely going to be other things that are going to get disclosed. And so many times buyers will just walk away at that point, depending on the materialness of the situation.
Very true. Very true. There was a lot said there, Jason. I think I would also add selling your business or getting the business ready to sell. That's a long game. You need to start thinking about that year. Like ideally from the day you start your business, you should be thinking about selling it, but definitely several years before you think you're going to be ready to sell, definitely start putting things into place so that your business is more attractive to people. We've already talked about cash flow. That potential buyer is also going to ask not only to see your financials, but they're probably going to want to see some tax returns as well for the business. So the thing that comes to mind for me is these people that hate to pay taxes, and they run as much as they can through their business so they don't have to pay taxes. A profitable business means you're going to pay taxes. And so they come to the table with, when they do that, when they try to get their taxes as low as possible, hopefully their preparer is doing a good job in explaining things about what they can take as a business expense and not, but it makes for a less attractive business. Everything centers around cash flow and profitability. when you're doing that. So you want to do that. Yeah. You want to make sure that you're thinking of the long game. It's not about saving taxes today.
Yeah. And I can tell you that will be a diligence item. They will compare your tax returns to what your financials say.
Financials.
That's one of the things I mentioned about hand grenades or things. A good broker is going to ferret that out and advise the seller to address that or get that fixed. Because like you said, Summer, it's one or the other. And I like to frame it in the sense when I'm at if I'm part of those conversations, which unfortunately I'm not many times where they just show up and you have I've decided to sell the business. What do you need from me? Or I have this buyer who wants to take a look. Can you add them to Xero or QuickBooks so they can look through the financials? It's like, oh, okay, good luck. We'll see how that goes. But if I'm part of those conversations, I'm telling you, would you give somebody $1 so that you can save 25 cents? And that's effectively what you're saying when you're increasing or making your financials look less profitable for some type of tax savings and things. And so usually around conversations like, hey, if I spend X number of dollars, I'm going to be able to reduce my tax rate down from 25 down to 15%. Okay, great. You're going to depress it for 1 year, but what's going to happen in those future years? And then and more importantly, when you come to exit the business, it's going to have a big impact on the final valuation, or if you're even going to be able to sell.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned wealth vehicle in my list, because let's think about this. Even though this is your business, this is your income source, right? So when you sell this business, of course, there's going to be some proceeds from the business, but you have to think about what needs to happen with that money so that it can continue to be a long-term income source. So again, if you're just running it down and expensing everything out, that's just taking value off. I think about it as a house. And if you're running it down and running up the expenses, you're taking bricks off of the house because the business is not being built to sell because you're taking bricks off the house.
Yeah. And then when it comes time to sell their baby, they can't understand why it's offered what they think it's worth.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's it. You put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and certainly money into this. And so you want to get as much as you can out of it when it's time to exit.
And it's something you're building. So I want to talk about something else, lead us into something else. What if the owner is heavily involved in the business, Jason? Does that increase risk or lower risk?
But depresses value. So and it's an increase of risk, if you will, a transferability of value. If the seller is leaving and they're integral to the business, there's not much value left. It's the plain truth. And this is, Masheka made this point earlier about building the business, having the systems in place. And the code word there is less involvement of the owner. And whether that's through systems, processes, whatever that needs to be, the more involvement of the owner or seller in the business on a regular basis, the less valuable the business is going to be at the time, at least in most cases, unless there's a non-educated buyer out there who ponies up and shows up and wants to buy, which that does happen from time to time. But in most cases, and especially if there's any type of advisors for the seller and buyer, that's not going to happen. And so just think about it, and especially if it's a critical process, the one I see most often is the current business owner, the seller, is heavily involved in business development and sales or something like that. That's the key. Nothing happens without a sale. And if they're the primary mover when it comes to business development sales, that's the first thing you have to work on, maintaining the value of the business and things. It's not just the cash flows, that if the owner is still involved in creating those cash flows to a large degree and the owner departs, there's very little value left at that point.
Yeah. So the owner should be working on getting out of the day-to-day running of the business. Yeah. And that can take a while.
Absolutely.
Take a while to get key employees in place and things like that.
And let's just think about this. Selling a business involves value. How valuable is a business that's totally reliant on you?
Yeah.
How reliable is that business if it does not run without you?
Yeah. Like Jason said, that's going to really lower the value of it.
Yeah.
So.
And in some cases, we have to deal with as a broker, I end up dealing a lot, I'll call it the psychological process of the seller owner having a very inflated value or idea of value of their business. I think that wraps around, in many cases, I would see the same psychology around they want it dependent on themselves because it feeds into their whatever reason why they wanted to get in the business in the first place, you're not going to be able to transfer much value if that's your mindset around things. And so the more you can involve others, yes, that increases costs, but also if you design it properly and have your margins in place, it actually increases the value for everybody. You, the business, you bring other employees and people into the business as well, but also lessens the dependency on you. And I think some people, just in my experience, that they want to be the center of the business for whatever reason, but you're not going to have much transferability of value in those cases and things. And then the other side is when you do sell, what are you going to do afterwards? And I'll touch lightly on that because it has torpedoed a couple deals where the seller gets into it and decides that they don't want to sell because they hadn't considered what are they going to do after. They just see the big dollar signs and, oh, great, I can go retire and play on the beach. And then actually, that's not very interesting to me. I still like doing things. And so be committed. And even if be committed to the process, let's say, of creating the value. But even if you don't sell, you're going to have a fantastic business after that if you go through that process. And
yeah, it is. It will be one you can step away from when you want to take an extended vacation or with your wife or husband and take time off for family and grandkids and things like that.
Yeah. The best businesses are ones that you don't need to be there, that are still creating value, and you take off on it to a day. And more importantly, if something serious comes up where you have to step away for taking care of family or something like that, then the business isn't going to fall away or have some type of a more negative impact or even having to close or something. Masheka, you had something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. And I was just going to say, too, a lot of times that's why people think they want out, is because they're so burnt out from doing all the things. And so a lot of times it's not that people don't want their business anymore. They just don't want everything that comes along with it. So a lot of times that's another point for really driving in. Can this run without me? So when you do need a break, because no matter how much you love your work, everybody needs a break sometimes.
Yep.
You can take that break and renew so that you can come back ready to, get into it.
I'll say another point of how to do it. We're talking about get ready, start doing it. We covered about the financial records, the bookkeeping. The second part is systems and processes. The SBA actually underwrites differently franchises versus other businesses. And the reason is because in their view, and I think that's an accurate one to some degree or a large degree, is those businesses that have those systems and processes generally create value over a longer period of time than those that don't. And so they look at franchise and they're willing to finance basically a startup because they've got so many of those systems and processes and things documented. And that's where the value is. Think about it from if you're the seller and you're trying to transfer the business to a buyer, what do they need to know? What are they going to do? It's not enough just to say, I'm going to give you 2 weeks of support after the sale, which is, as a broker, this is what I commonly saw is, okay, I'm willing to give you 2 weeks of training. How well is that going to transfer? It's just impossible to unpack multiple years of seller owner involved in the business in just 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen and things. And so there's where to focus your time is build your systems, build your processes, unload many of those responsibilities that you, the owner, currently have to people on your team or in your business. And that's where the value unlocking happens, is your systems and processes. Maybe the other thing I try to tell clients is the numbers are a result of the actions that you're taking, all the thousands of actions that you take in a business that you and your team do on a regular basis. And the more you can systematize those things, the less failure you have. And financial results are results of what you're doing. And so when there's problems financially, it's because there's been thousands, if not millions, of execution errors over a period of time that are showing up in your financial. Poor decisions, poor interactions with your customers, not feeling valued, whatever the situation is, they're all accumulation of those things. Their financial results are a result of those errors over a period of time, execution errors. And the more you can document and have systems in place, think about it like airlines. One of the safest places you can go to get anywhere is through commercial air travel. The fatality rate, which is the most common one that's measured, is fantastically below what getting in your car and driving to the local store is. By far, it's not even close. And it's because they have strong SOPs and systems, and they've had to refine those. And rightly, let's say people are, once you're in would it be aluminum or titanium tube traveling 600 miles an hour, 39,000 feet. There's a lot that could go wrong, but there's a lot of engineering systems process that's been developed over those years that make it the safest place to be. And the same thing applies in business. The more variability you can remove from the business through systems and process, the higher the value. And I know from sophisticated buyers that I work with, they look for those things. They would pay more over the market for businesses like that as well. So that's where you're going to unlock the value. If you're asking how to do it, that's where it goes.
I agree.
I think we've done a good job discussing this today, and I'm just going to end it with a reminder for some takeaways from this discussion. Simple ways to increase value: remove yourself from daily operations, build recurring repeat revenue if possible, possibly a diversified client base, make sure your financials are clean. So we beat that one like a dead horse, but anyway, but it's very important. I'll say it one more time. We'll probably say it again. Make sure you document your systems and processes, right? And build a team, not just employees, leaders. Yeah. Y'all got anything to add?
No, you summarized it very well.
You did summarize it. Thank you. You summarized it very well.
Well, I have enjoyed leading this discussion today. Y'all have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
This content is for general informational purposes only and is based on current law and guidance as of the date of recording. Tax law and regulations are subject to change. This discussion should not be considered tax, legal, or investment advice. Listeners should consult their own tax or financial professional regarding their specific situation.